Hi, and welcome to the Back to Bark project. I'm Elizabeth Unan, the Regional Director of the Sydney, Australia region. Today, we are delighted to be giving a brief overview of three select works by Carl Vine AO, one of Australia's most prominent composers. Born in Perth, Western Australia in 1954, his catalogue currently includes 8 symphonies, 13 concertos, music for film, television, dance and theatre, electronic music, and numerous chamber and solo works. He was the artistic director of Musica Viva Australia, the world's largest entrepreneur of chamber music from 2000 to 2019, and he is a senior lecturer in composition at the Sydney Conservatorium of Music, the University of Sydney, a position he has held since 2014. Our analysis of the following 3 works is a mere starting point, and we urge you to use it as an introductory stepping stone to your own rich and fulfilling discoveries. We will now hear from Carl, who shares some of his advice for young composers. So I'm joined today with Australian composer Carl Vine. Thank you so much for your time and for speaking with us today.
It's my pleasure, Elizabeth.
So just a few questions. What inspired you to start composing?
I don't think I ever really had an option. It was always from the age of 5, I was interested in music and wanted to play music. Um, about the age of 10, I realized I could create it. And I was improvising from age 10 onwards. And my first score was for piano when I was age 10.
Wonderful.
It's not very good.
So it came to you through just organic improvisation on the instruments that you were learning.
Yeah. And I was playing everything. I was playing pop music. I was playing classical. I did the whole sort of classical realm and pop music. And then I was going to say I was heavily into the Beatles. I wasn't, but I did enjoy their music.
Wonderful. And what is your general compositional process?
That's an interesting one. It's kind of evolved over the years. I need to start with some impression, an idea of a texture or a feel, and then build it up bit by bit and try different things out, see how close they are to realizing that dream or that imagination. And basically, like a sculptor chipping away at everything that doesn't match the dream.
And do you ever use extra musical sources for inspiration?
Yeah, sometimes. The majority of my work is pure music. There is no external influence. But occasionally I've had to do things like write something about a novel or a poem or a person. And just occasionally, well, in fact, there was one that I had to write for a painting, and I'm not particularly interested in painting. But I did enjoy the process. And so then I wrote another piece that was about the title of the painting that wasn't about the painting either. So.
And you used to write music for dance. Can you talk about what it was like to write for dancers?
It was something that I fell into. That when I moved to Sydney from the sticks, which is the Perth in Western Australia, and the only people I knew in Sydney at that time were dancers. And so it just so happened that I was playing piano with the Sydney Dance Company for their classes. And because I was there, they said, well, will you write some music? And so it really also grew organically. And it was then an interesting thing to look at energy in music and rhythm and harmony and how all of these things propel you, and they propel the musician, and then they also needed to propel the dancers. So I think it gave me a particular view of the moving power of music.
And obviously there are great differences between writing for orchestra and chamber music and solo pieces, different considerations. But would you say that your general process stays the same across all of this different medium?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Look, and I have done a lot of all of that now. But in the early years, every new task was a learning experience. So I learned, it took me about, 15 years to learn how to work with an orchestra, because I never had a class in orchestration. I just picked it up by making a lot of mistakes and having a lot of musicians yell at me and get very impatient. But it's a really good way to learn because you don't like people yelling at you. And that then is something that you never forget.
So not having a teacher perhaps, or being in a structured course, it's not a barrier to discovering composition. I mean, it certainly helps, but one
Yes,
can't do it without that.
yeah, I did. I was being a little bit misleading. I did actually study four-part harmony and counterpoint from the age of 12. And I had 3 years of composition training at the university with a fellow called John Exton, who was a committed serial atonal composer. And so I went from Bach to Webern and Schoenberg. So I did actually have formal training, and I did 3 years of various music units, but I never completed a degree. So I wasn't a complete neophyte or a complete dilettante. I knew bits and pieces, but the rest of it I put together through practice.
And do you ever experience writer's block? And if so, what do you do to overcome it?
I experience writer's block regularly, so at least once every year or two, and occasionally it can last a couple of months. And if it has lasted a couple of months, the first month I hit my head against the wall, waiting for inspiration to break through. The second month, then I just go out and watch a lot of movies.
Very useful.
Very useful. So it depends. It's really what I need to do is look outside the task. So whatever I am required to do, I need to go and do something completely different, and then come back to it and try to have a fresh view.
Yeah. And do you have any advice to young composers who may be interested in writing music, but they don't really know where to start?
Listen. Listen to everything. Listen to all sorts of music. Work out what appeals to you, what moves you, what makes you feel good, and then work out why. What is it doing? How does it do it? And if you are interested enough, then you will analyze the music on your own, no matter what sort of music it is. And if it is classically based music, go and get the score somewhere. And a lot of scores are online. Certainly, if they're out of copyright, you can get almost anything online that's out of copyright. Look at the score, see how it's put together. And the advantage of looking at the score is that you can look at things in both the horizontal and the vertical, so you can see how everything lines up as the music runs past. You can also see the individual lines. Now, you can do that listening to music as well, but you might miss some things. And so the other key is to listen more and more intelligently. As you listen, you can train your ears to pick out certain things, to pick out melodies, counter melodies, and how they're relating, even in pop music.
Yes, definitely. And just another general question. It's obviously a very multifaceted process, but what's it like being a composer?
Well, it is mostly a solitary undertaking. I don't think I have ever, because there are people who do collaborative work. They work with another composer on something. I don't think I've ever done that. I do work with musicians, so if it's for a specific instrument or a specific group, working with the instruments with the players is incredibly useful and informative. And so what I know about how the way instruments work is from working with real musicians and playing alongside them. And so actually having a performing career is a really good thing for a composer if you can you should try to do as much performing as you can.
And what's it like to collaborate with performers? I imagine that it would be a very rich dialogue back and forth.
So sometimes it's just hurling abuse, but there are also elements, as you eloquently put it, of dialogue. Um, but it depends on many factors. Look, if people are making music together, generally they have a shared view of what the purpose is and what you hope to achieve. So generally, it's an incredibly collegial environment to work in, and if the environment is that good, then everybody wants to help the composer understand better. If they're not doing something right, you need to encourage them to do it right, or yell at them. But it is the way for both parties to learn. And being a performing composer is also useful because you have to play your own music often, and then that tells you what to do and not to do, and to be more considerate of the performer.
Well, on that happy note, thank you so much for your time and for your expertise. It's very helpful.
It's my pleasure, Lizzie.
Thank you. The first work we will discuss is the first of 4 intermediate piano pieces titled Red Blues, which is also the name of the set as a whole. Composed in 1999, Carl writes in his preface, "I wrote these 4 little pieces with the single intention of providing an enjoyable musical experience with limited technical demand. I began with some strict requirements, no fairies, goblins, or other cuddly fairy tale creatures. Within these restraints, the starting point for each work emerged almost automatically to provide the widest variety within such a small collection. Although there are various levels of finesse that can be applied to this music, the only criterion that really matters is that they be enjoyed. I hope to show you how a small amount of musical material can be used in different ways to create a fun piece. This piece can be considered in 3 sections. Section A begins with an ostinato, that is, a repeated pattern in the left hand, with 2-note chords using perfect fourths, fifths, and tritones. These harmonies, in conjunction with offbeat rhythms and staccato and accent articulations, creates a spiky texture which is fun to play. In bar 9, the change of pitches in the left-hand ostinato coincides with a change in dynamic markings. Previously at mezzo piano, meaning moderately soft, the music now moves to forte, meaning loud. Carl also moves these right-hand chords by minor thirds and semitones, using the higher range of the piano, which increases the intensity and the drama. The transition to section B in bars 13 to 17, while looking distinct from previous bars, still shares characteristics we have already heard. If you look at this left-hand passage, for example, we can see that Carl has used rhythmic augmentation. He has made the rhythms of the left hand longer, while still preserving the familiar contour, the direction, the shape of the ostinato. The right hand foreshadows or hints at material yet to come. A gradual decrescendo to piano, meaning that we gradually become soft, concludes section A. This shift from B flat to B natural in bars 16 and 17 in the left hand may slip past you, but as with all music, I encourage you to consider every detail that you see and ask yourself why the composer has made that choice. This seemingly simple detail, an ascent of a semitone, not only creates a shift of a perfect fifth to a tritone with the F in the right hand, a feature again heard previously, but a step of a semitone is often used by many composers to create suspense. After a dotted crotchet rest, we are launched into section B. Although contrast is created as the tempo is now quicker at dotted crotchet equals 120 and we are at forte, section B still shares many characteristics with section A. The left hand still has an ostinato, which shifts up a semitone at bar 22, and the right hand explores perfect fourths again on the offbeat. This is a great example of using material already heard, but in a new way. Bars 24 to 26 explore call and response textures between the right and the left hands, climbing higher and higher octaves before we are brought back down in bars 27 and 28. We arrive at section C in bar 29. The tempo is back at dotted crotchet equals 112, and we explore the darker and richer tone colors of the piano. Bars 29 to 30 are transposed down a perfect fifth in bars 31 to 32. So here's bars 29 to 30, which you can see are now shifted down in bars 31 to 32. These 4 bars, to me, sound rather relaxed and easygoing. Bar 33 is transposed up an augmented fifth in bar 34. However, these 2 bars sound rather suspenseful to me. If you feel the same way or differently, I encourage you to think of why. Consider harmony, contour, articulation, and the sudden presence of rests. All of these elements contribute to the mood and the feeling of the music. Do you remember the material used to transition from section A to section B in bar 13, that descending scale in the right hand, which you can see again over here? We have similar material here in the right hand, which leads us to the end, but it is now a descending chromatic scale. The piece ends with humor. At pianissimo, meaning very, very soft, Carl ends the piece with a musical pun. Without delving too deeply into theory, we already expect this chord to resolve to A major. However, Carl spells it differently on the page, using A flat in the right hand as opposed to its enharmonic equivalent of G sharp. And unless we are the performer, we don't know that it will actually resolve to E flat. It subverts our expectations and gives us a little surprise to make us chuckle. Considering the intensity of the piece, I find it funny that the work ends in such an unexpected manner. As a performer, it allows you the freedom to really express and bring out these contrasts. The next work we will discuss is titled Love Song for solo trombone with CD accompaniment. Composed in 1986, the work is dedicated to trombonist Simona de Haan. Carl also writes that the piece is concerned more with the purely lyrical aspects of musical performance. While demanding considerable stamina on the part of a live trombonist, the long sustained notes throughout the work function as a warm-up for the player's embouchure, culminating in some of the highest notes available to a tenor trombone. Whilst we will only hear a short excerpt performed by Back to Bach member Jackson Bankovich, this rising trajectory and increasing sense of excitement and energy is still heard within this short excerpt. The work begins with 3 short lyrical statements from the trombone. Each statement slightly increases in length and uses wider interval jumps, incorporating both stepwise motion and large leaps. Here is statement 1, statement 2, and statement 3, which ends over here. After a brief 1-bar rest, the tape part comes in. As we can see from the score, there are only 2 tape voices at the moment. However, As the piece progresses, the tape part will expand to include up to 5 individual voices. This increasing momentum of complex dialogue between all parts, including the solo trombone, in its highest registers, creates a sense of forward motion and heightened energy. In the beginning, however, the tape part begins with sustained notes in the bass and constant 2-bar phrases of steadily descending and ascending quavers in the upper tape part. Whilst the trombone continuously expands upon the material heard in the very beginning, the quavers in the tape part can be heard in relation to bars 6 to 8, as they comprise leaps of similar intervals. You can see and hear that each part occupies its own aural space. In other words, the parts do not overlap in pitch, and you can clearly hear each part separately and as a whole. As Carl's intentions are, according to his program notes, to culminate in some of the highest notes available to tenor trombone, starting the piece in this simple but effective manner lets the musical space grow. Indeed, just as our excerpt ends, we can hear the introduction of a higher tape part in triplet quavers, signaling the beginning of a new section, which you can see around bars 31 to 32. You can see that Carl carefully marshals the textures to create a steady rise in energy. We hope you enjoy this excerpt performed by Jackson, and we encourage you to seek out a full version of the work on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, or on CD. The final work we will discuss today is called Love Me Sweet. Originally written for voice and chamber orchestra, the version you will hear today is for voice, piano, and cello. This work was written in 1993 for a television miniseries called The Battlers, based on the Kylie Tennant novel of the same name. Carl writes that the text is adapted freely from the first 2 verses of Elizabeth Barrett Browning's poem, A Man's Requirements. Miss Browning's poem is a marvel of economy and wit, with an ironic twist in its tale emerging only at the end of the last verse. Words were changed to assist vocalization and comprehension, as well as to provide a more clearly adoring context for the song. One of the main musical features of this beautiful piece is Carl's use of suspensions and resolutions. A suspension is a note that does not traditionally fit within the chord or harmony, but resolves within the next chord. This is evident from the very first bar, which establishes the key of F major. These suspensions and resolutions, in conjunction with the relaxed tempo, piano dynamic marking, con pedale pedal marking, and rich tone color of the piano, creates a sense of longing and warmth. The left hand has a rhythmic ostinato which outlines the chord of each bar. The right hand not only reinforces the vocal line through doubling, which you can see here with these upward pointing stems, it also still creates that suspension and resolution. Our arrangement, which includes cello, simply reinforces the lowest voice of the piano through pizzicato. This constant, steady texture allows the listener to focus primarily on the voice, as each part functions as an accompaniment to the vocal line. The vocal line itself is simple but effective. It is lyrical and memorable. Indeed, this is a work which many young singers perform in Australia as part of their vocal recitals. You will notice that each phrase is exactly 4 bars in length, which further contributes to the memorability of the piece. Remember the context and function for which this music was written. It is for a TV miniseries and must be friendly and easily digestible to the audience while still being skillfully written. Although this work is tonal, it is not predictable, as Carl uses harmonies which we don't usually expect in the key of F major, such as C minor, E flat major, and G major chords, among others. The middle of the piece features the piano with the cello, and in our arrangement, the cello is playing this middle line using arco. This leads into the next verse, with the piano now taking upon a more integrated role with the voice. The piano now provides distinct counter melodies, which you can see in this verse and especially in the last verse. This is not only achieved through more active rhythms, but especially through register, which rises above the vocal line, especially near the end. The end is especially poignant as we end on a D major chord. In the context of this piece, the F major tonality fluidly mixes with that of D minor, the relative minor, and so we can hear this final resolution as a tierce to Picardy.